Our top focus on world DNA. Syria looks to pick up the pieces and find direction on the shape and nature of its government ahead. This even as Israel keeps up strikes on Syrian territory. The Britain-based monitoring group Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Israel fired 61 missiles at Syrian military sites in less than 5 hours, maintaining a campaign which started after the fall of Assad nearly a week ago. The leader of the rebels who seized power in Damascus criticized Israel for the strikes as well as its incursion into southern Syria. The chief of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS group, Abu Muhammad al-Gulani, highlighted how Israelis have crossed the disengagement line in Syria and said it threatened a new unjustified escalation in the region. But then later in the day, in a statement on the rebels' Telegram channel, he added that the exhaustion in Syria after years of war and conflict does not allow the country to enter new conflicts. Meanwhile, Lebanese militant group Hezbollah has warned the rebels that the new Syrian government should not establish ties with Israel. This as Syria struggles to get on its feet again. Preparations are on for Damascus International Airport to resume operations again. It has been closed since December 8th, following the fighting to oust al-Assad. The director of International Airport, Anis Follow, said that the Syrian airspace has already been opened for safe passage and that the airport would soon be ready to receive flights normally. Meanwhile, Syrian pubs have also reopened, but they are working cautiously after the rebels take over because they fear that the HTS would forbid the sale of alcohol in this Syrian territory. While no official statement has been made in this regard, an HTS official on condition of anonymity said that the reports surrounding the ban on sale of alcohol were not true. He added that the government had bigger issues to deal with. Meanwhile, one major development is the reopening of the Turkish embassy in Damascus, which had suspended operations back in 2012 due to escalating security conditions during the civil war. Syrians welcomed the move, and on your screens right now, you can see the moment when the Turkish flag was raised above the walled compound in the Syrian capital for the first time in 12 years. Meanwhile, top diplomats from the US, the Arab League and Turkey met in the Jordanian port city of Aqaba to discuss how to support Syria's transition and chalk the path forward for Syria. The gathering, which also had in attendance representatives from the European Union and the United Nations, they spoke at length on the priorities that the new leadership in Syria should adopt, including inclusivity, minority rights, and the destruction of Assad-era chemical weapons stockpiles. They stressed that Syria should not become a base for terrorist groups. However, there was no Syrian representative on the table. Also, Iran and Russia, who were the ousted regime's key supporters, were not invited.
We do not want Syria to descend into chaos. We don't want for Syria but to move along a path that leads it toward the future, as I have said, a future that is prosperous for all Syrians. The mechanisms to achieve this future are clear. Mechanisms we all know, defined in Resolution 2254.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the country's officials have now direct contact with HTS and urged them and other rebel groups to assist with locating U.S. journalist Austin Tice, who was detained in Syria in 2012, and the whereabouts still remain unknown. And to discuss what is happening in Syria, we are now being joined by Adrian Calamel from New York. He's a fellow at Arabian Peninsula Institute, terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar, as well as the author of forthcoming book on Hezbollah. Welcome to WION, Mr. Calamel.
Thank you for having me, Raisha. It's a pleasure.
Likewise. Now, one message that came out in unison at the Aqaba summit in Jordan was to support a peaceful transition process in Syria. While that was the main agenda, talk to us about the challenges that lies ahead in Syria and what are some key issues that the HTS group might face going forward.
Great questions. With HTS, I think everybody needs to. We're looking at a transitional government and trying to bring and restore some order to the country that has been racked by civil war for so long. In the back of our mind, we have to remember that HTS is essentially, they are Taliban, they're Al-Qaeda. That's who a lot of the rebel forces were. They're Chechens from Al-Qaeda brigades, Uzbeks, Tajiks from Al-Qaeda brigades. So what we've seen during this time is Jalani, who's gotten the full support from Erdogan, and we see the same type of thing in Afghanistan with the Taliban. This charm offensive is that they have ridden the kind of wake of the ISIS barbarism as presenting themselves as this moderate state option. But what we're really going to have, and this is my greatest fear, is that everybody's rushing through this. Turkey's driving this. The United States is with this in the dying days of the Biden administration, is that you're going to have another Islamic emirate right on the Mediterranean this time. So you have an Islamic emirate in Afghanistan. You're going to have an Islamic emirate in Syria. And those are the building blocks towards building a global caliphate. And that should be everybody's concern. Jalani just didn't shed his jihadist Al-Qaeda clothes overnight. He was issued a bayat with Al-Qaeda, and you can't break those.
Right.
ISIS broke that, and we saw what happened to ISIS. So this is a concern.
Right, Mr. Calmal, I was just coming to the point you made there that perhaps the power vacuum in Syria, that could give rise to ISIS, and that was also something which was discussed at the Aqaba summit. Your assessment of that, and also what do you make of the fact that there was no Syrian representative at the Aqaba summit in Jordan?
Another great question. That becomes problematic. If we look back at the United States experience in Iraq, we made numerous mistakes. But the first mistake was disbanding, eliminating the Ba'ath Party and considering them all persona non grata. And that's taking a look at everybody that was working for the regime in some capacity and labeling them as completely evil and need to be gone. What Syria needs after these years of civil war is they need to rebuild. They need to rebuild infrastructure. They need to rebuild civil society. And there are elements inside that society that should really be part of this new discussion on how to build Syria again. Unfortunately, they're being excluded from this. Now, I can understand why they may say that they're Assad loyalists. But I think you could peel away some people who are not Assad loyalists who say that see a vision that is more aligned with a tolerant society that is not in Jalani's playbook.
My last question to Mr. Calmal, and I want to talk about what is happening on ground. The HTS chief recently, just a few hours ago, said that Israel has crossed the disengagement line in Syria because Israel has been pounding Syria non-stop. My question to you is that how could the latest statement and the ongoing strikes by Israel perhaps affect all efforts to bring stability in Syria post the fall of Assad regime?
This actually brings more stability. And when I say this brings more stability, what they have done is they've taken out the chemical stockpiles. They have taken out drone factories. They have taken out Air Force, the air capabilities, the things that they can use to wage war, to wage campaigns against other countries, but also to suppress the people within the country. So if we look at Afghanistan, there are Taliban members because the United States left behind all that equipment that they're flying helicopters. They're driving American-made tanks. Israel's not going to make that same mistake. They are not going to let these weapons hand into the fall of a terrorist organization. And that's what HTS is. They're a terrorist organization being backed by Erdogan in Turkey.
But Mr. Kalmal, such actions can also provoke retaliatory measures from HTS, which we will have to wait and see. But thank you for joining us and we're on with your insights on this.
Always a pleasure, Risha. Thank you.